Hi, I'm Colin Murphy. I'm the Deputy Director for the Policy Institute for Energy, Environment, and the Economy here at UC Davis. I've been a longtime UC Davis and ITS member. I actually got my PhD here at ITS in 2013, where I worked on life cycle analysis of biofuels. I spent about a year in the CCST Science Policy Fellowship, working in the Capitol, the building on the screen behind me, working as a member of the Assembly, where I got to engage in legislation around sustainable transportation, among other things. And then after I finished that, I spent 4 years working on climate policy advocacy for NextGen before coming back to take a position with the Policy Institute. And it was really a very welcome homecoming for me, because when I was a grad student, the Policy Institute was just starting up when Anthony Eggert was founding it and getting it off the ground. And it really started producing things during the year when I was trying to finish up my dissertation and get out of here. So I never had as much of an opportunity as I wanted to really engage in the kind of work that it did. But it's exactly the kind of work that I wanted to do, and knew even as a grad student that was what really called to me. The ability to use science as a tool to help improve the world. And in most cases, that works through public policy and working with people that have a real strong connection to policy and understanding of how the systems actually work, and a good idea of the balance between not sacrificing scientific accuracy and not oversimplifying what are really complex problems, but also synthesizing and consolidating messages to the point where people who don't have a PhD can understand and really use what we provide them to make strong science-based policy. Since I've come back to UC Davis, I've focused my time primarily on low carbon fuels. Low carbon fuels is a subject that ITS has had a very long connection to. I'm sure you're probably aware, Dan Sperling is one of the co-parents of California's low carbon fuel standard. And because of Dan's presence, because of ITS's long, very constructive history of engagement with the Air Resources Board, UC Davis has been one of the few academic institutions that has continuously maintained a presence and an activity in the low carbon fuels policy research space. There were some years where fuels were very far off the public agenda among policymakers. And so at times that presence and activity was limited to just one or two people. But it's always been there, and ITS has really helped carry the torch for that particular subject matter. And now with the federal government, as well as many jurisdictions, making very ambitious but necessary commitments to reducing carbon from their transportation sector, the research that we've been investing in and committing to for the last decade has become even more important. And the foundation that's been laid over the last 15 years has allowed us to build a new low carbon fuels policy research initiative, which I co-direct along with Julie Whitcover, who's been here at ITS Davis and the Policy Institute for many years. So within that low carbon fuels research initiative, we are doing a number of things. We've become one of the top academic centers that policymakers go to when they have questions about what the science says in relation to low carbon fuels and how you actually build and implement a functional low carbon fuel standard. We've been funded to provide technical support to the Pacific Coast Collaborative. That's a intergovernmental agreement between California, Oregon, Washington State, and British Columbia. They have agreed to do a number of coordinated climate actions, and UC Davis has essentially had a seat at the table with the heads of the regulatory programs to help provide assistance, to help link them to academic research, to expand their research capacity to deal with critical questions that they may not have the time or staff or bandwidth to address themselves, and to help shape research and to guide research into the most important and beneficial areas. And so building on that with a number of other states, including New York and New Mexico and Colorado and Minnesota, as well as others, that are getting interested in using the low carbon fuel standard concept and that basic model to help them meet their transportation goals. We've really leveraged this history to become the leading academic center for questions on the low carbon fuel standard. In addition to helping disseminate the work we've already done, we're continuing to advance research in the space on our own. We have a number of projects underway the core and the centerpiece of which is we are building the first model of low carbon fuel standard and fuel markets, with the idea that we can, once it's complete, start answering a lot of the critical, what if questions about policy and technology and regulatory design. The issue with fuels, and one of the reasons why they're so complex, particularly as we transition away from petroleum, is that now the fuel space intersects heavily with electricity and with utility space, intersects with agriculture through biofuels, intersects with a number of other heavy industries through renewable natural gas or hydrogen, or other advanced chemicals. So understanding the impacts of policy through a market mechanism like the low carbon fuel standard means you have to start being able to anticipate and quantify how these other sectors are going to behave as you make changes to your fuel policy. And until now, nobody's had that capacity. And we are putting the finishing touches on essentially version 1 of this model that will give us this policy tool to do scenario analysis within California and help us answer critical questions about, if California chooses to make some sort of policy change, what's that going to do to the low carbon fuel standard credit market? What's that going to do to the credit price? And then what are those changes in the market going to do to every other fuel that impacts California's transportation system? And this is the kind of predictive tool and analytical tool that is really necessary to inform our policy development as we go into a more rapid acceleration of our decarbonization targets. In addition to the credit market model, we're dealing with a lot of other questions related to fuel policy. We have a project going on right now where we are looking at the likely air quality impacts of Oregon's proposed expansion to their low carbon fuel standard program. We all know that, generally speaking, when you replace a petroleum vehicle with a non-petroleum alternative, that's usually a win for air quality. But quantifying exactly what the impact of that over the scope of a state, particularly a state that doesn't have quite as much analytical infrastructure in place as California, this is a new problem and a new challenge. And so we're working with Mike Kleeman, a professor in civil engineering, to do a high resolution model of the emissions impacts of likely changes to Oregon's vehicle and fuel mixture, and then model what's that actually going to do to their air quality over the next 15 years. And so this will let us better understand some of the co-benefits that come along with these programs, and again, let us move policy onto a much stronger scientific footing. We've got a similar project in the pipeline for California. In this case, we're really looking at what happens if California decides to more ambitiously push the deployment of sustainable aviation fuel. What's that going to do to both the alternative fuel markets in California, and also what might that do to air quality over the next 10 to 15 years, using a similar analytical approach to the study in Oregon. We're also looking at a number of other issues, including land use change, soil carbon impacts from biofuels. We're evaluating the regulatory authority of the EPA to make changes to the federal program and perhaps adopt some of the policy structures that have been used to such great effect in California. And we're also trying to get a better understanding of how fuels policy affects environmental justice and equity, and answers a lot of the critical questions that people in these communities have been asking of policymakers for quite a long time. With all of this, there's a lot of excitement around ITS and around the Policy Institute. For the first time in many years, we have an actual low carbon fuels team, and it's great to have a variety of voices and a lot of people working and being able to really increase the pipeline and get more work going at once, and be able to help more jurisdictions and provide more impact at once. So I am absolutely thrilled to be here and to be part of this great effort, and look forward to continuing to do this for a number of years to come. Thanks.